Wonderful day. Happy May 1st. Welcome to Sean's Thoughts. You're here with me, my turtles, my plants, and my Lego Simba. Today, as we explore what my thoughts are today. And actually, I had a pretty insightful thought that I'm super excited to share with you. Actually, it's a thought, I'll say, that came to me while I was having a bath, actually. As I've often mentioned, baths and being immersed within water, especially water that is filled with perhaps Epsom salts, which have different compounds and such that help you perhaps connect to another form of thoughts, maybe. Anyways, so I wish to share with you today with my thoughts. So I'm happy to see you. Welcome to, as I said, Sean's Thoughts. These are all the things that I'm thinking about, and this is what I wanted to share with you right now. And actually, what I'm planning on doing going forward, perhaps, is trying to condense my videos into smaller packages, meaning that rather than having a long 40, 50-minute talk, I have the idea, perhaps, or maybe the intuitive kick in the butt to package up things in a smaller context. So we'll see how that goes. Anyways, thank you for sharing with me today. As I had mentioned to you before, I was recently listening to an audio, but before we get to that audio, I want to talk about the yellow pants. See, because I've always been reluctant to wear these colorful pants. They're by a brand called Nike, which of course I don't condone the brand, but yet I definitely connect with the vibrant colors. See, part of my personality, you'll say, is I love color. I've always loved color. In fact, when I was younger, there was a brand called Crisscross or something to do with that. It wasn't the group Crisscross, but it definitely reflected on multicolored clothing. And in fact, I had these pair of pants that were two different colors on the front. They were blue and orange, and on the back, they were orange and blue. And I totally loved them. I loved when jeans used very different color threads, such as green. I had a pair of blue jeans that had green stitching in them, and I've always loved color. And by the way, loving color has nothing to do with being gay. And as I mentioned on my last audio, or even in the post that I made about that, to be gay is to be filled with love and joy. And that's actually the real meaning of the word. And I recognize that, like many words in our reality, these words have been distorted in order to create separation, to create hostility and misunderstanding, to create, you know, different meanings for words so that they fit in with the current narrative, and it slowly moves people's minds and concentration over to a new meaning, and they're not necessarily recognizing that the word has a completely different meaning. So I recently had someone on a podcast of mine asked me, how long have I known that I've been gay? And I've been gay forever, meaning I've been in love and I've been in joy and I've been immersed within all of those attributes for as long as I can remember within this lifetime. And yet, I love when it comes to attraction, the opposite sex. I love women. I love being with women. And so, therefore, my expression of myself, my feeling to be in vibrant colors, such as these yellow full pants, have nothing to do with sexuality. So, I just want to kind of to get that out of the way because, in a sense, with every podcast I make, I essentially become more of my true self. And stepping into frame and wearing yellow pants, such as vibrant and yellow as this, are truly an expression of the colorful personality which I have. And so, with that being said, let's get into what I was inspired to talk about today. So, thank you for joining me. So, and even the way that I cross my legs, once again, has nothing to do. It's just for me, for my way my body structure is, it feels more comfortable. And so that's the way that I choose to do it. And it works out perfectly. So, what I wanted to do with all of you today is I wanted to share a quote that was provided, or I essentially copy pasted it from a video that I recently watched. And this video is by a person named Mama T's official YouTube channel. And well, this particular quote isn't necessarily this person's quote. I've heard it before in a limited form. I wanted to share with you because in this actual instance, that Mama T had actually extended the quote. And I feel that this is extremely important to, emphasize right now because as I'm realizing, my channel just isn't about me sharing my thoughts, throwing and casting them out on the wind. Although I do trust in God and source and your higher angels, if you require to hear this, then you'll hear this. If you don't, well, then, you'll scroll on and life will continue being what you have because, that's what apparently you're looking for. But if you're not, then you will continue on listening with me. So I'll read it first. Now let's bring it into human experience because this is where sovereignty actually lives. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. Where your energy flows, that system grows. So if all of your attention is plugged into one platform, one narrative, one structure, then your energy is feeding that system's expansion. Now, like let that settle for a little bit. If you haven't heard of that before, then of course, that's brand new information. And so it's definitely worthy of reading again. Now, why I'm reading this is because there are two parts to this quote that are very important. And the first part of it, and I'm going to read this again, where your attention goes, your energy flows. I don't know why I needed to look down for that part, but that's the quote. That's the quote that I learned from a former mentor of mine, Kevin Trudeau. And, if you, I know you're watching, Kevin. So, hello, hi, how are you? I hope you're doing awesome. Thank you for all of the information you gave me and all the discernment you allowed me to practice. So, I definitely appreciate it. Now, with one thing that he did taught me is that sometimes you can't just teach an entire lesson. It means you have to teach a little bit and then later you might go back to that and then you'll dig deeper into it and then later you'll go back to it and you'll dig deeper into it. Now the reason being for this is spaced repetition, but more importantly and probably easier to say that when you go back to something you haven't listened to in a while or you even listen to like the former day or the former week, you are a completely different person because that information which you infused into your corporeal being, into your essentially your essence of who you are, is now a totally new person because that information landed upon you and it triggered something or it activated something. And therefore, you became a different version of yourself. And if that information, upgrades you, it makes you feel better, it adds to your field, well, then you are an improved version of yourself. And information can even sometimes land in our field and give us an experience that we may not at first accept or receive or appreciate. Thank you, loud truck. But yet, after that trial's over, sometimes that information turns into something that benefits us and strengthen us. And, many people say we're here on this planet right now to grow, to learn, to expand. Well, at the same time, we're here to help. We're here to, unite and regroup perhaps. And anyways, so where your attention goes, oh, sorry, yeah, where your attention goes, your energy flows because your energy is your attention. Your energy is where you direct that. And that's not just, attention of who you listen to, it's also attention to where your money goes, where that currency that you traded your time and your livelihood and your experiences, because we miss out on a lawful lot of experiences because we're too driven to run after, a fiat currency system that may be draining us, that idea of a house and many times being a money pit where when you buy a house, you, even if you outright pay for the house, there's cleaning which requires time, there's, energy which, and buying all the furniture, and there's taxes on the house and there's upkeep and maintenance, and if you buy a big house you have to pay someone to clean it. And it's the idea that even when you think one thing, there's a lot of times another thing. But my more important point back to this because I was just segueing off if you didn't realize, was that where we place our attention is where our energy goes. And that's super important. But what was so spectacular about this, and what's essentially, or up until the time that I was with the Global Information Network, which is an organization that Kevin had created or is a part of, anyways, what it hadn't said at my time of being within that, I always love these cars who feel they need to accelerate just right in front of my building. Anyways, what was left out perhaps is the next part where your energy flows, that system grows. And so what that means is the energy that you put in, when we direct it to a certain place, such as this platform or even this particular podcast, Sean's Thoughts. I just created this really cool promo. I'll put it somewhere in this video because I'm really elated by it. But anyways, where you send your attention, that particular system or that platform or that or group of people, it grows. And so it's very important to recognize that when we direct our attentions to all of what's going out there and we essentially start sharing videos, especially videos that are fully AI created. And sometimes it's hard to tell now, especially with the amount of deep fakes and videos that are even showing people. And perhaps that's why I brought that video up that I created. I used this new YouTube Google app where I'm actually able to take in inspirations, or not take in, but give them to the app, and then use those with what I want to see and what I want the characters to say. And that particular video that I created, that I'll post it, as I said in this video, somewhere you'll see it. It's only 16 seconds. So it's definitely worthy of a short stop to go and watch it. But the characters on there, they look like they're human. Yeah, sure, there's odd times when, there's 3 arms or 3 fingers or 2 legs with an extra leg in the back and, a lot of discrepancies, but yet it does have the ability to actually recreate reality to such a degree that if you're not fully in tuned or connected with what you are doing, then you perhaps will miss that. And so back to what I was saying is, where your energy goes, that system grows. And that's more, very relevant to my own experience that I had with the Global Information Network. See, we'll go on to the next sentence and then I'll continue back on to my experience. So, if all of your attention is plugged into one platform, one narrative, one structure, then your energy is feeding that system's expansion. And that's something to be very aware of, especially for all my former brothers in the Global Information Network. When you're fully focused on what one person is saying, what one system is saying, and the Global Information Network was a system, or is a system, I should say. And, I did definitely practice discernment and I learned so much from that organization that I completely value. It's actually what led me on to my own self confidence journey, where I started to pick up the pieces of the person that I perhaps once was when I had my own production company. My own production company that I went out in there and funded all by myself, of course, with my former partner. And we essentially created something that was unique, a system, once again another system, but an organization where I employed people who were similar to me, that were really wanting to step into the field of their desired work. Many of them had part-time jobs or even full-time jobs. One of them, an actor, his name was Leonard. He actually had a job, I believe, of delivering alcohol, but yet at nighttime, countless hours he would spend on working and rehearsing this stage play that I did called Permanent, that told a story of an unknown illness that essentially fell upon his character and how he dealt with it. And he would spend an awful lot of time practicing, rehearsing for this play, and he did an exceptional job. And yet, in the end, unfortunately, we had no money to share. The actual production went into negative standings, and yet I still continued on and released the second play because I recognized that if I kept putting my energy in and I kept directing it to where I wanted it to be, that eventually it would, you know, skyrocket into something much more beautiful, just as this podcast is, just as my Patreon page is right now, becoming something that I could, have imagined, yes, but it will eventually become something that I would never have imagined back in that former state of mind. But yet, with every moment that I roll forward, that I dust off all of the drawbacks and interference and former projections, because I want to remind you for a second, whoever's watching this, that's watching me for an alternative reason rather than just to watch my podcast. If you're watching, if you're viewing at me from the shadows thinking that you can somehow distort what I'm saying, I remind you that this podcast as well, this episode of Sean's Thoughts, as well as all of my episodes going forward and all the way back in time, are protected from interference, from distortions, from illusions. So if you proceed at your own risk, is what I'll say to you, because, you know, I'm stepping into my light just as many of my viewers are as well. And together we are going to make massive changes to our realities, to the worlds around us. And, we are going to ripple our light across this globe as this planet ascends into something far greater than it has been essentially de-evolved into for the last few hundreds or millions of years. Anyways, let's get back to this. So we're getting back to my experiences with GIN. And GIN is the acronym or the short form for Global Information Network. So when I was there, and when I was there, meaning that I participated, I actually met members. I was recruited into the organization. I was asked to pay $1,000 USD to join. And, the sales pitch that I received was phenomenal. We'll teach you all these secrets that, other elite people in the world have been using, the different techniques and the different, whatever it is that will help you get everything that you want in life. Well, shortly after I started reading the books and connecting with it, one of the first books was a book called The Secret. And The Secret was a book that held a little bit of truth, yes, but it didn't really give the recipe. It was more about telling you the possibility and then letting it go. Now, I'm sure that more of whatever Rhonda had to say in the book came out later, but yet when I first picked up this book and I really did listen to it, I mean, I bought the audio, I listened to it over and over again. I bought the book, I bought lots of the books, I gave the book away to other people. Like, I was really into that book, but yet nothing changed. Now, you'll understand if you listen to my other podcasts, perhaps why that was, but yet I became disillusioned. It didn't work. And so this book actually became one of the books that we were required to read on the Jin's book list. And there were other books as well. And anyways, where I'm going with this is we were instructed to recognize that where our energy goes, that essentially, as I said, it where our attention goes, our energy flows, means that we should focus and recognize and be aware where we place our attention. So for instance, if we're sitting there putting all of our attention on horror movies, and horror movies, by the way, they instill fear, and when you have fear within you, regardless if you're enjoying it, that energy does go out into the world and is consumed by different systems, we'll say. And so recognizing that and being aware of that, and that directing our attentions on all the negativity and the hostility and the war and the craziness that we're going through, or even going back and looking at all of what happened in the past and all of the negative people and what the negative people said and all of their plans. When we're directing all of that attention, guess what? We're essentially limiting our attention from going on our own personal self, directing it to inwards, because that's where the true healing does. That's where the true healing happens, I mean. And so the important part of this quote was taking it to the next part, recognizing when we take all of our energy and we direct it into only one place. So whether it's one guru or one church or one mosque or one religion, we essentially limit ourselves. See, I've been on this endless journey, and I'll call it endless because I believe that learning and upgrading is a continuous system. When we direct it only on one place and we really just say that book or that teacher or that guru or that master, that only they have the answers, and we essentially dismiss everything else that comes into our field, then we're truly limiting ourselves from exploring the possibilities of something more, recognizing that when things come into our field, when this video fell into your recommendation field, there's a reason, first and foremost, because as I said in one of my former videos, that there is a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of distractions in our world that would prefer that you not listen to me, but not just me, anyone who speaks of personal growth, of self mastery, of learning to master your own self, not self help, because you don't need help. No one needs help. Help means that there's something on the outside that's going to come in and it's going to solve what's on the inside. What I believe is important is learning to use self mastery, to learning to train yourself to be your own leader. For if there was a world with leaders out there where everyone was able to lead themselves, to recognize that, littering didn't help the community, and it didn't provide a job like my best friend Mark once told me. I was walking along one day and we were in a park or something, and he blatantly just threw his litter on the ground, his fast food container or something like that. And in appalled, I turned to him. I said, "Well, why are you doing that?" He goes, "Oh, well, I'm giving someone else a job." And to me, that wasn't self mastery, especially when we lived in a world where if you walked a few more meters, there was a garbage can and we could have thrown it in the garbage and we could have done the job for ourselves. The world isn't here to essentially be so that we can walk on other people's backs. I believe we are here to be in unison, to work together, to create a better world. And when we actually come together to support one another in such a substantial way, we will therefore elevate one another and ourselves up to a higher perch that perhaps will give us the vantage point to recognize that the world is not here for us to live in, but we are here to live within the world and work in unison with all of this beautiful nature and all of these other beautiful Homo sapiens and a large assortment of life that is seen and unseen. So, back to what I was saying with this. See, I found my experience, and this is only my experience. And my experience was, of course, influenced by external forces that were perhaps on both sides of good and evil. And my experience was when I was within this group, a lot of people suddenly saw Kevin as a guru, as the master, and only what Kevin said was permitted. And I often did hear this. And when we questioned this persons within our smaller group, there would often be hostility and, in a sense, resentment that we were questioning their perceived icon of know it all. And yet there are times when even that person that we put up on a pedestal doesn't know everything. Like me, myself, and I'm still learning, I'm still growing. And that's essentially the whole purpose of my podcast, is to share the lessons that I learn and to share them perhaps even when I learn them. And that's what came to me when I was, sitting in my bathtub using my salts and such, protecting myself at parts and, relaxing in other parts, and having that insight where I suddenly heard Mama T make this state, but she just didn't end at one part. She went on to say it, which truly resonated with me. Because what didn't resonate with me when I was within the global information network was the conformity which was required. Because I saw that conformity as a system that didn't relate or even, connect with me. And one of the biggest things was the requirement to wear a penguin suit. And penguin suit, I mean like suits. See, even when I was a top salesperson for the brick and they asked us to wear a suit, eventually I'd bring out my suit jacket and I'd just hang it up for if I needed it. And I'd wear my shirt and tie. And eventually I would wear my shirt, my dress shirt, my long sleeve dress shirt, and I'd remove the tie because I didn't like the restriction that it brought upon me. I like to be free. I like to be sovereign and to be myself and to dress exactly how I wanted to. And I loved dressing up. But yet, wearing a tie, especially because I had such a thick neck at the time, it felt restrictive. So eventually, the company actually started to allow us to wear golf shirts. And although I still didn't bother wearing golf shirts because I really loved wearing my dress shirt, I loved colors. I was one of Le Chateau's greatest shoppers. I loved buying all of their beautifully artistic, colorful, and creative dress shirts. And, sometimes they had French cuffs and sometimes they even had the French little forgetting the word, cufflinks. They had even had cufflinks sometimes custom for each shirt, but they were all very colorful and they stood out. And that's the way that I wanted to dress. And so when I joined the Global Information Network, at first it was more informal, and we were able to dress how we wanted to dress and more comfortably. And we did these amazing uh, I can't think of the word, these functions, sure, we'll call them functions, at what we called the Love House. And it was basically my friend's home where we got together every few weeks and we, in a community, we shared cooking, we shared activities, we shared learning. Now, some of these learning exercises were exercises that were part of the system of the Global Information Network, but yet other ones were basically dream board creation and sharing information. But when we started to move into the conformity portion, which was sitting in meetings where women had to dress, business like, and men were required to wear suits in order to attend, I started to draw back from that because although my former partner had went out with me and we bought $1,000 suit, it didn't feel like it was me. I felt, dressed up and, as they say, dressed for success, but yet I was still conforming to someone else's system. And that's truly where this phrase, this quote from Mama T came in. And I'll repeat it again. So if all your attention is plugged into one platform, one narrative, one structure, then your energy is feeding that system's expansion. And that's an important part because I believe that all information that I receive and my attention should be shared. And that's something that's very important to me. Actually, at the end of my time with the Global Information Network, I attended one of their functions in Chicago in 2023 called Friends and Family. It was held at an amazing hotel in Chicago downtown, and I really enjoyed the some of the actual experiences that I had there. The hotel was very opulent. The people were amazingly well dressed. They were loving, kind, and full of energy. So much energy, in fact, that during our meetings, we would often exhibit that information. We would share it. We would congratulate one another. We would, support one another, which was fantastic. The challenge was that suit. I wasn't all about wearing, flashy clothings and flashy watches and, you know, expensive cars and things like that. I wanted to share that energy so much so that during that event, I actually would immerse myself within the energy of that event. And then I would go off into the city and I would, contribute to the homeless. I actually sat down in the streets with immigrants that were one was from Colombia and she wasn't able to speak English, and I sat there with her and talked. I conversed with what I would consider a gangster or this group of young men that definitely put off the vibe, and I conversed with them. I shared myself with Mexican migrants who were working. I gave money away. I sat in parks and talked to people because what I wanted to do with that energy is I didn't want to contribute it and to essentially utilize it the way that I was being systematically employed to. I wanted to share that experience and that energy not only with my brothers and sisters at Gin, but also with the Chicago community as a whole. So I took the train, the downtown train. I walked at night, like at 10 o'clock at night. I was told by several people that I shouldn't be out on the streets because it was dangerous. And I could imagine from, movies like Blue Bloods and other American, crime movies that show all of the crime and the gangsters and that happen. But yet I walked around in dark parks in the middle of the night, this Caucasian person with, different types of people, different types of gangs, we'll call them, or you can even call them brotherhoods that perhaps, are distorted in a sense in our modern TV movies and such. And I felt completely comfortable because I knew I had the energy that I had brought with me. I had the protection and the love of God, and I had a lot of things around me that were protecting me. And that important part was that I realized that I didn't want to essentially limit myself to an organization that required me to pay a lot of money to join. They required a lot of money to consistently remain in. Now I recognize that the reason that's portrayed or put forth by that is that you want to keep the group pure. You want to keep people with the same resident frequency. So therefore the money that you spend, which was by the way, a lot of money. I actually invested probably about $20,000 USD into this whole organization. I recognized that they wanted to keep the energy of the system pure because eventually they allowed anyone to join, means so many people were given the ability to get that free offer to join and then just have to keep contributing that $100 or that $135 USD every month. But yet I wanted to share this information. I wanted to be a part of the world as a community, not belong to an exclusive group that went to opulent hotels and drove expensive cars and such. Yes, that's cool. And that's definitely something that perhaps even I will in the future encourage, because that one of the greatest lessons that I learned is in order to be different than you are, you have to experience the life that you would choose to live. And we experience in whatever manner we can have, like test driving a car that you wish to perhaps one day own might help you more visualize driving that car so that you can therefore bring it into your reality. And staying at that fancy hotel, sure, that might be great. Yet doing that at the expense of putting yourself into debt. And many of my brothers and sisters in Gin I saw were putting themselves into debt, although they were told not to put themselves into debt. But yet the sales tactics that were being used that I saw being employed, such as payment plans and, you know, the fear of loss, or the fear of missing out, which is called FOMO, fear of missing out, telling people that the prices were going to go up soon and therefore they needed to go on a payment plan now. That just became very obvious to me that it was, in a sense, a tactic perhaps that I was no longer in a line with since my training as being a salesperson, or maybe it just wasn't for me. Maybe there was a message personally for me that it was time to take what I had learned through discernment and check out, because I did. After that, I immediately cut off myself from that organization, means I canceled my membership, saved what I could save on my hard drive of the lessons that I had learned, because there was a lot of valuable lessons that I had learned. And perhaps someone hearing this audio right now may resonate, and maybe they won't. Maybe they will, object to what I'm saying, because the interesting part is this friends and family event that I had went to, after I had left, I had no longer had any friends or family within that organization, which I found pretty amazing. See, all my life, and I know I'm going over the amount of time that I was intending to spend, but I'm going to try. But anyways, all my life I had been dedicated to working for myself. Not only did I create my own production company, I sold chocolate bars when I was 12 years old, and I was a really great salesperson. We would get these chocolate bars from a vendor and then we would resell them. You know, it was a salesman in training, is how I approached my clients, my customers when I sat outside of banks. I had, different writing experiences where I tried to sell my songs and my stories. I had a fully successful, very successful tailoring company that I essentially brought up from nothing and turned into a six-figure a year company. I know that doesn't seem like a lot when we look at the world around us right now, but 10 years ago, that definitely was amazing. And it was amazing that I had done that all myself. And I've had other things, such as even here, my own YouTube channel, New Earth Creations, where I've created several series. And I think I have like 7 series of distinctly well organized, based on the playlists and podcast series here, which of course, I encourage you to, look into any one of them afterwards. Trust what you're being guided to essentially connect with. And, anyways, I had so many other things that I have done personally myself, because I've always believed that I was here to support myself, not help another company make money, even if while I was employed, I was making a lot of money, because whatever money people make from a company is simply a cost to that company. And, there will come a point within that company where they let everything go and walk away with the profit. And I've seen a lot of that happen. I've seen a lot of it, especially recently, happen. And while I won't get further into that, you can go back into my podcast and you can listen to different topics about that exact situation. See, I wanted to direct my own efforts on creating my own ecosystem, my own environment. And I felt honestly that even when I was with that group and I was telling them about all of the vitamins that I was selling, like I worked for this company called Max GXL, and they sell this compound which essentially enhanced the glutathione within your body. Now, glutathione is a very important precursor to your body's health. And I won't get too much into it, but yet I wanted to bring that forth, something that I had actually utilized in my own health. And, there wasn't any interest. It was only the, subscriptions and the actual vitamins and what the group sold already, that was agreed upon by higher ups, that was even permitted. Yes, they listened to me talk about Arbonne, another multi-level marketing company that I had been, introduced to by my loving sister Samantha, and yet they weren't interested in that either. And they didn't. And I say they, I mean, I wasn't even informed till much later why that was the case. And, well, we won't bother going into that. The point being is that I wanted to essentially be myself, dress the way that I wanted to, and put my energy into systems that would further enhance my growth so that I could then share it. There's that idea of that if you're in an airplane and something's going on, you put your own mask on first, so that therefore, when you need to, you can help the persons beside you put their mask on. And so, therefore, that was a really good example, is I was looking to make myself stronger and make my community, my life, my family, my loved ones, all of us grow our ambitions. And what I was finding was, of course, a lot of things that were not in resonance with what I was choosing to do. And so I want to leave with this sentence again, or this quote from this video. And this time, now that you've heard everything that I have to say, you'll hear this with new ears. Now let's bring it into human experience, because this is where sovereignty actually lives. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. Where your energy flows, that system grows. So if all your attention is plugged into one platform, one narrative, one structure, then your energy is feeding that system's expansion. And if you're wanting to expand that one system, then you'll recognize when I say, don't put all your eggs into one basket, as being a very important moral lesson, because when that one system is no longer there, and that doesn't just go for, my experiences in the global information network. It goes for anything that we do in life, from the church that we visit, from the groups that we belong to, from the podcasts that we listen to. I even encourage you, go off and listen to other podcasts. I'm going to link Mama T's video, this particular one that I listened to, because she gave a great understanding of, or possibly an add to my awareness of what true reality is. And while she has her own ideas and her own understandings and her own experience, it's important that we branch out, that we read other books other than the ones that are put on a book list. And even we expand. See, me, myself, and I, when I received that book list of recommended readings, I was told I had to memorize the first X number of books. But yet those books didn't interest me. I did, buy them. I kind of read through them. I bought their audios. And yet the books that really interested me, that were on that book list, yes, that expanded from that book list, but were more important to me, was this book here. Now, this is not a religious book. I am the word. It's a channeled text. It's a text that Paul Seleg actually was able to bring into existence live in front of people, almost word for word, which opens us up to the understanding and the possibility that there's a lot more things going on in the world than we could ever have imagined. And another book that I absolutely admire, and I actually have a video, and this particular book, at the end of this video, I'm going to connect my podcast where I read a portion of this book. And this is called The Untethered Soul. It's by Michael A. Singer. Now, once again, it's on that book list, but it was a lot higher up. And now this book was far more attractive and far more appealing than me memorizing the first 10 books of a book list of books that really didn't resonate with me, such as The Secret. Yes, there was The Secret, but there was so many secrets behind The Secret that memorizing that book was kind of, for me, my experience. And that's what this podcast is about, me sharing my experience. And whether it resonates with you, whether you disagree, you want to argue, you want to tell me I'm gay because I'm wearing yellow pants, whatever it is, I'm cool, because that's one of the best things that I have went through over these last 3 years, is my ability to remain steadfast in what I actually truly believe. Those two books, phenomenal books. I actually bought multiple copies of both of those books. The actual Untethered Soul book, I bought, I think, 7 copies. And on my journey across Canada, I hid them in different locations. One at Tim Hortons behind this big screen TV, in a Starbucks in, I think this one was in Hope. I shoved it on the side in between a bench. And, I hid these books, the 7 copies or 6 copies, across North America as I traveled from here, from Nanaimo to Winnipeg. And then I also bought several copies of I Am the Word so that I could give them away to people when, I connected with them. And yet I'm still holding on to 2 of those books. That actual copy that you saw isn't my copy. My copy actually I gave away. The copy that I'm reading for is water damaged because it sits in my car and I read it on occasion. And that copy is an untouched, brand new copy that hopefully I'll give away to someone someday when I pass them in my physical form, because, you know, the books we read and where we put our attention, ensuring that our attention is directed to sources and to areas that we acknowledge that by us empowering that source, that it grows. And that includes God as well. That includes the love and the compassion we have for God. God becomes stronger. It becomes more apparent within our lives. See, I'll get into a story later about, what I've come to understand, who God and source is and such, but I want to highlight that where we direct our attention, if we prop one person up on a pedestal, it doesn't matter whether or not it's, our favorite author, it's our favorite musician, it's our favorite actor. I never had a time where I felt that, any actor was ever better than me. I never got that, oh, I can't believe it. I never got that. When Tupac Shakur, when he passed away, I cried. I cried because I really connected with his music. And I was essentially looking at the fact that perhaps I wouldn't experience his music anymore, which, by the way, even that's changed because now we've got AI that can recreate Tupac Shakur's voice, fully. And so you can't even tell that it's not him anymore. But nonetheless, other than that, when my love for someone has, that person has passed, that's an emotional feeling that I feel. But yet, when famous people pass, they had their lives, things happened. I never really met them. I didn't know their form anyway. So that's something that Ram Dass had once said about his mentor. When his mentor passed, he didn't have the same emotional breakdown that all of the other people had because he wasn't aware of their form anyways. But getting back to those books were provided to me by joining that group. So I'm forever grateful. But I recognize that there was alternative paths for me to go on and to get me to where I am now. So, kind of the message here is whatever you take away from this message, and I highly encourage you, always, always listen to an audio fully. That means don't create yourself an open loop where you only got half the message. So if you have yet to finish some of my former audios that did resonate with you, I encourage you go back and listen to them fully. But mostly, I encourage you to utilize the awesome technique that I did learn from Kevin called spaced repetition. And that's go back and listen to the audios or even sometimes the movies and read the books. It doesn't have to be the whole book. It can just be the passage that you flip to or the page or the chapter that you flip to. That's what I do with the I Am Word book. It sits in my car and I'll occasionally open it and flip to it and reading it. Even if it's the Bible, open it, flip to the page that you're drawn to read, and reread it because the person you are is a brand new person, scientifically proven with all of the science research showing that up to every 7 years, all cells in our body regenerate. And I want to underline that word, regenerate. It means those unhealthy cells that you were told are unhealthy, they can regenerate back to their healthy versions if you perhaps take the steps of that inner healing that I'm recommending that you do. And it's only a recommendation. It's your choice. It's your choice whether or not you feel the illnesses or you move past it and grow and become stronger and reconnect with that which you feel in your gut, in your heart, and in your pineal gland to be the truth. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for sharing with me, for streaming with me on either YouTube or Rumble. I have some amazing thoughts of where I wish to take our community, which I've fully posted in my blueprint playlist, which you can find on Rumble and on YouTube, as well as fully talked about in my Patreon page, which I highly encourage you. Come over and share your attention, help me create and join this community that is going to essentially one day, very soon, soon, sooner than soon, very soon, be an amazing group to be along with. I have this amazing retreat location already scoped out that a former friend of mine, Carissa Bell, and I had discovered. It's an amazing, beautiful place. I fully invite her as well to, let go of the past and, let's move forward. And, maybe one day I'll see her at that retreat and we can get to a place of healing, growing, and community organization because that's where it's all about. Not just in me, it's in you as well. It's in what you do from this moment of now moving forward that matters. And everything in the past, and I really do mean every manipulation, every bad thought, every projection, every lie, every love lost, every pain felt, every trauma endured, every trauma that you continue to hold on, all of that stuff can move to the side and we can do some TFT tapping, which, by the way, we're going to do soon now that I'm actually comfortable enough to be on the camera. I'm going to show you what all the different tapping points are for thought field therapy coming soon. So definitely subscribe if you are about healing, and join me on Patreon if you want to become something more than we are individually. So thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed all of my beautiful plants. These are my celeries that were once in a store ready to be eaten, and now they're growing green and they're going to get super tall. You'll see. Thank you so much.